side. All the way in. Seder? Okay, so we are on Daf Kuf Tes. We're on page 109 of the Gemara in Pesachim. And even though we talked about having a series on Pesach, and this is Gemara from Maseches Pesachim, so ostensibly it would be Pesach related. So the Gemara doesn't actually talk about the Seder tonight. It doesn't even talk about Pesach tonight. At least not in a direct, straightforward fashion. But the Gemara is going to talk about wine, and the Gemara is going to talk about meat. Wine is kind of an important ingredient on Pesach. And according to tradition, meat actually is missing from the Seder. So I suppose there's a little bit of a tie-in. And you'll see, as we learn the Gemara, you'll appreciate and understand the Pesach connection. So the subject of tonight's class really is gladdening the heart. That's really what the subject is. Idea of joy on Yom Tov. And it's a mitzvah to be joyous on Yom Tov. And it's a mitzvah to gladden other people's hearts on Yom Tov. So in the middle of page Kuf Tes, the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanon. Our rabbis learned, Chayiv Adam L'smoyach Bonov Ubnei Beisei. A person is obligated to bring joy to his family, to his children, and to members of the household. Beregel in the Yom Tov. According to old Kisvayad, old manuscript says, Chayiv Adam L'sameach Es Bonov Ubnei Beisei. Same idea. You're obligated to gladden the hearts of those for whom you are responsible. You have obligations. You're a leader of a household. The leaders of the household have an obligation. You have to provide sustenance. You got to make sure the roof is fixed. It's not leaking. You have an obligation. You have responsibilities. So one of the responsibilities you have, being at the helm of a household, is you have to bring joy to your family. It doesn't just say you have to be joyous. It's not enough if you're joyous. It says, Chayiv Adam L'sameach Banav Bnei Beisei. He's obligated to make others joyous. But not all the time. Everybody thinks that there's a verse in the Torah that says, Mitzvah Gedola Liyas B'Simcha. It's not a verse in the Torah. They think it's like a Mishnah. Maybe a statement in the Gemara. But it's really not. It's actually in a manuscript from Nachum of Breslov. And then outside of the manuscripts of Reb Nachman, there's nothing like that. The Alter Rebbe has a chapter of Tanya, many chapters, but at least one, which is devoted exclusively to the subject of joy and its importance and its relevance. And the Alter Rebbe says, if you're not going to serve Hashem with joy, you're not going to be able to serve Hashem fully. And since you have to serve Hashem fully, you have to serve Hashem with joy. But it's not a mitzvah in and of itself. Typically speaking, the idea of being joyous, it says you're supposed to be joyous, find joy in serving Hashem. In other words, the joy is not an end in and of itself. It's a means to an end. The end is to be an effective servant of Hashem. If a person is happy about what they're doing, they serve Hashem well. If a person is unhappy about what they're doing, or doesn't have a passion, or doesn't have a fervor, so then they don't do it well. You're supposed to serve Hashem well. How well? How well is called well? If I'm doing better than my neighbor, is that okay? Does it make me a champion? So we're in a race with only one person, with ourselves. That's someone we're in a race with. You know that silly story of this lion that breaks loose in the safari, and two guys are running, and the lion's getting closer and closer, and one says to the other, panting, he says, "Why are we running? You think we can outrun a lion?" And his friend says, "I just have to outrun you." You're only in a race with one person, but it's yourself. You have to outrun yourself. What does Hashem expect of us? He expects us to be everything we can be, and nothing we can't be. He doesn't have any expectations from us to do something we can't do, but expects us to be everything we can be. And everything you could do, you must do. And that's the only way we can define success in Avodas Hashem, which is, of course, the meaning of the Gemara, also a Gemara in Pesachim, and a few pages from here, where it says, Yagaito Matzasa, that if a person, that's the Gemara elsewhere, I'm confusing it with something else. But the Gemara says, Yagaito Matzasa Tamin. If you tried hard, that's believable. Why? You never saw anybody who was successful without trying hard? And you never saw anybody who tried really hard and failed? But then, of course, the question is, how do we define success? And how do we define failure? And contrary to what people would typically think of success or failure, that you measure it against others, or you have some kind of common benchmark and say this person succeeded because he outpaced the benchmark or went beyond, transcended the benchmark, the truth is that in Hashem's system, we each have our own benchmark. Hashem creates us with our own benchmark. He creates us with our own bar, which is called success. And that's all He asks of us. He just asks us to be a success, which means you apply yourself 100%. And then the success comes in the way of umatzasa. It's beyond like something you find. Something which you couldn't even have planned for this. Why? Because you give it all you got, and then Hashem takes you over the edge. So you have to be joyous. But there's no mitzvah per se, okay, let's be joyous now. Why should we be joyous? What do you mean why? Because it's a mitzvah to be joyous. No, there's no such thing. It's not true. There are 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. One of them is not serving Hashem with joy. There are 248 mitzvahs positive. No, one of them is joy. There are 365 negative mitzvahs. It's not joy. The Rambam says that the mitzvah of v'samachta b'chagecha, the mitzvah of rejoicing in the festival, from this the Rambam says we can understand the power and potency, the meaning of joy. And how joy is important, and then he goes on to say that it's a great service to Hashem, and it's a great opportunity, and a tremendous accomplishment when a person does indeed serve Hashem with joy. But that's all a means to an end. The end is successfully serving Hashem, which means marshaling every ounce of strength and wherewithal. You're not joyous, you won't do it. But on Yom Tov, there's a mitzvah to be joyous. Just like that. So if a person is joyous on Yom Tov, obviously the joy of Judaism, obviously the joy of Yiddishkeit, obviously the joy because it's Yom Tov. But on Yom Tov, it's a mitzvah. It's true that in the month of Adar, we say, Mishnichnas Adar, Marbim B'Simcha. We increase in joy, we increase in matters of joy. But it's not a mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah. It's teaching of our sages. We should serve Hashem with even greater fervor. That means the capacity for joy is raised. It's enhanced during the month of Adar. So we accomplish even more when we serve Hashem with joy. But the mitzvah, chayiv means you're obligated. It's not an elective, it's an obligation. It's not an elective to keep Shabbat. You're chayiv adam. This was you're obligated. It's halachic obligation. Chayiv, a person's obligated. And not only that he should be himself joyous. L'sameach banav u'bnei beisai. You're obligated that it's anybody that you provide for, that you're, so to speak, responsible for, you're obligated to bring them joy beregel. How do we know this? Because the Torah says, v'samachta b'chagecha. Because the Torah says you should rejoice in your festivals. Now I have to tell you that the Tosfos is very bothered with right over here. He says, what do you mean? You should rejoice with your festivals, and the Torah quotes a verse. The Tosfos says, Tema. The ha'ikra gabe ma'aser sheni ksiv. That pasuk is actually talking about Ma'aser Sheni. The Torah uses terminology of joy in an imperative 4 times. The Torah talks about Ma'aser Sheni, which is the second tithe, which is brought to the holy city of Yerushalayim, and I'll go back and explain that in a moment. The Torah talks about Shavuot, and it says there's this mitzvah of being joyous. The Torah talks about Sukkot, and it mentions it 3 times, you should be joyous. And then it talks about Bikurim, firstling fruit, and the Torah talks about the idea of being joyous in your festivals. Allow me to explain. The land of Israel is a holy place. What is the meaning of sacred soil? What makes it holy? Or what is the symptom of that soil being holy? So we have to talk about intangibles through their symptoms, through what we see. We cannot describe it because it doesn't have a color, it doesn't really have definition. If you ask somebody to describe what electricity looks like, he will not be able to tell you because it is not physically possible to see electricity. And even when you see some kind of photonic reality that's engendered through electricity, that is only a superficial symptom, that is a side effect, that is created by electricity, it is not electricity itself. Electricity is not visible. So what does it mean it's a holy land? So if we want to understand that, we have to look at the symptoms. What's the side effects of holiness? So there's various things which are influenced by the nature of Israel being a holy land. And one of them is that the things that grow in the sacred soil have to be treated specially. So it's holy, it's sacred, it's set aside, it's not typical. It's not every day a camp. And what does that mean on a practical level? It means that you cannot just decide you're going to eat once you bring your harvest home. First of all, there's a holiness. That whole harvest is off limits. It's called tevel. And in order for you to take it out of the status of tevel, you have to separate 2% or so, and you take that 2% and put it aside, and you establish it to be holy. And like you homeopathically take the grand holiness, which settles over the entire creed, the entire harvest, and it goes now on. You super intensify the holiness in one very tiny amount, and that very tiny amount is potent, which is the theory of homeopathy, actually. I don't know if it works or not, but the theory, at least, has a theory, is a Torah theory. A theory makes sense. You could have it concentrated. You could concentrate something into one area on a very simple level. That's how they make orange juice from concentrate. Or that's how they make Coca-Cola in fountains. Whatever. The point is that there's this principle of concentrating. You put concentrate, and from concentrate you could dilute. So typically, when we want to take something which is very large in volume and want to be able to compress it into a very small amount to be able to ship it halfway across the world, and then it could be sold by mixing it with the local water, what do? We create it in concentrate. So take a little can of whatever it is, syrup, you can use to create orange juice or Coca-Cola or whatever else they do it with, and you ship it to the other end of the world, and since you're shipping it to the other end of the world, you're going to pay by volume and by weight. So you try to compress it as much as possible. And water weighs a lot, but water is everywhere, it's available everywhere. So to take it to the other end of the world, and then water, which costs pennies, instead of paying taxes and tremendous tariffs, three quarters of it or 9/10 of it is actually water. But why pay tariffs on it? So you have the idea of taking something and putting it in concentrate. And when it's in concentrate, then it's like a special thing. So, okay, I'm just like hacking a Chinik a little with it, giving you an example. So the bottom line is, the truma, the food that comes from Israel, what grows from the sacred soil of Israel is sacred, is holy. So we have to concentrate the holiness onto a small amount. And after we finish concentrating the holiness onto a small amount, we give it to people who are called holy. What makes them holy? Makes them holy is they have a capacity, a potential to do holy things that the rest of us do not. Those are the people who are called kohanim. By virtue of their DNA, their spiritual makeup, they're able to do certain things which enable us to draw close to Hashem. The meaning of a korban is a permutation of the Hebrew word kiruv, which means closeness. And when an offering is brought in the Beis HaMikdash, through that mechanism, we, the Jewish people, become closer to Hashem. The world becomes a holier place. Who can do that? Only the Kohen. He has a special soul which is built to conduct that kind of energy. And he's able to focus it, he's able to guide it, and he's able to charge it. And because he's a holy person, he's given a holy task, a special neshama, he can eat this concentrated holiness, and it doesn't affect him, it doesn't harm him in a bad way. On the contrary, it energizes him. A regular person eats truma, he's chayiv misa b'dei shemayim, he forfeits his life, he's going to have a premature death sentence. Why? Because he absorbed too much energy. His body's not able to absorb it and diffuse it. But the Kohen is uniquely suited for this. He could absorb it. You with me, Sophie? Okay. So there's really nothing to do with what we're talking about. No. I mean, it kind of does. See, go tell your husband he's a Kohen. He's a big tzaddik. Now, after we finish taking the 2%, which is called truma, then we take 10%. Who do we give it to then? To the Levi. The Levi is not such a holy guy. The Levi doesn't have that capacity that the Kohen has, but the Levi has a job to do. And since he's busy with his job, he's got to eat. He doesn't have fields. He doesn't have a portion of the land of Israel. So we have to provide for them. So we have this responsibility to provide for the clerisy or clergy of the Jewish people, the Levites who are dealing with the Beit HaMikdash, and they should be available for any kind of needs of spiritual service. So we have to provide them. So 10% goes to support the Levites. The Levites themselves have to take 10% of what they receive, and they give it also to the, you got it, the Kohanim. Okay, now the Levites are eating Meiser, and they can invite you for lunch. It's not holy. The Kohanim have your 2% and 10% of the 10%, and everything's great. What happens next? Now we have another tax. Now we have another tithe. And this is called Meiser Sheni. So before you can go on and just enjoy the harvest, there's still like a little bit of holiness left there. So we have to further concentrate the holiness. And that further concentrated holiness is called the second tithe. What makes it holy? What makes it holy is it can only be consumed in a holy city. Where's the holy city? Jerusalem. We only have one holy city, really holy city, right? Biblical Eir Kodesh, Yerushalayim Eir Kodesh. So we go to Yerushalayim, and when we're lefnim and achayim, when they air the scrimmage of holiness, it actually has a wall which represents a scrimmage of holiness. When we're there, we eat the Meiser Sheni. Yeah, we're not going to leave the whole world alone right now, but that's what it means for us. So, Meiser Sheni is kind of sacred, and therefore there is conditions. Regular Jewish people could eat Meiser Sheni, but there are conditions to how and when you can eat it. And one of the things it says of Meiser Sheni is you have to eat it in a state of joy. Because you have to be joyous when you come to Jerusalem. You have to wipe that smirk off your face and be happy. Because you come to Jerusalem, you don't kvetch about it. You're happy to be in Yerushalayim. And you're eating that food happy, and there's a certain time when a Jew is told by Hashem in his Torah not to be happy, and that he's not even allowed to praise Hashem and thank Hashem and pray to Hashem. And that's Rachmanu Litzlan, heaven forfend, when somebody loses a loved one. It's called the Onein. When you're in a state of aninut, that's it. No happiness, no Meiser Sheni for you. Can't eat Meiser Sheni when you're in a state of aninus. As it says, Le'echalti meni ba'ini. Now, when did people eat Meiser Sheni? Let me go back. Where did people eat Meiser Sheni? Yerushalayim. So when did they eat it? When they came. When did they come? 3 times a year. What are those things called, those 3 times a year? Shalosh Regalim or Shalosh Chagim. V'semachta b'chagecha. Oh. So we have a pasuk that speaks about Meiser Sheni, and the pasuk says, when you come with your Meiser Sheni, when did you come with your Meiser Sheni? Obviously in the time of Yom Tov. And what are you going to do with your Meiser Sheni? V'samachta l'fnei Hashem, you're going to rejoice before God. So Tosfos says, I don't understand what you're talking about. You're coming along and giving this mitzvah, you have to be joyous on Yom Tov. And where did you get that from? From a pasuk that speaks about Meiser Sheni. It's not even talking about Yom Tov, it's talking about Meiser Sheni. It just happens to be that when is the Meiser Sheni consumed? In the time of Yom Tov. But it's not per se a Yom Tov thing. You can eat Meiser Sheni anytime you're in Jerusalem. What if you have a wedding and you go to Jerusalem for a wedding? Could you eat your Meiser Sheni then? Yeah. You don't have to eat it on Yom Tov. So if you don't have to eat it on Yom Tov, what's the big deal about Yom Tov? And how could you learn from that pasuk? So the Tosfos is very, very concerned by this. He says in the very same parsha, in the very same Torah portion, this is in Parshas Re'eh, it's the same chapter. He says, with regard to the festivals, it says, "V'samachta ata uvincha uvitecha." So what happened over here? He says, why? Now, the truth is that the Tosfos seems to have had a different version of the Gemara, because that's actually the pasuk that we are bringing over here. But the Tosfos says the reason that he had his Gemara said the pasuk of Meiser Sheni, and the reason that he believed that was accurate is because that pasuk says the word beisoi. It says home. It says the home. It doesn't say yourself. And what is this statement of the Gemara? The statement of the Gemara is not that you have to be happy. The statement of the Gemara here is that you have to make your household happy. So therefore, he says that's the natural pasuk to bring. The pasuk that just says, "V'samachta b'ata uvincha vitecha," he says here, it says the emphasis, t'chsiv beisei behedya. Here it says openly the concept of home, and because it says openly the concept of home, so that's why it says, and according to the Tosfos version, it was V'svata ata uveischa, which is not our version, by the way. But our version is quoting the pasuk which speaks about the Yom Tov. But Tosfos' version was quoting the pasuk that speaks about Meiser Sheni, and Tosfos answers that question, and he says because we want to emphasize the responsibility, the obligation towards the home and the household. Now, this is very interesting because if the Torah necessitates us to make our household happy, does the Torah have to say we have to be happy? It goes without saying. If I even have to make others happy, of course I have to be happy. How can I be miserable, make everybody happy? You ever saw anybody like that? Besides a clown who's miserable himself and makes everybody happy, or comedians who are all depressed. But the most normal people who make somebody happy, you have to be happy yourself to begin with. So if I have an obligation for samachta, if the Torah comes along and says to me, you should make your family happy, obviously I have to be happy too. It's self-understood. It's not just you be happy, make others happy. Okay, that's the statement. That's the statement. Chayav Adam. So the Gemara concludes the statement, B'mem mesamcham, and how do you make him happy? How do you make him happy? So the Gemara says, how does anybody get happy? L'chaim. That's good. How do you get happy? B'yayin, with wine. Rashi doesn't say a word. Straight up, what's the problem? How do you get happy? With wine. So that's the opening statement of the Gemara. The next statement of the Gemara is Rabbi Yehuda Aimer. So Rabbi Yehuda says, 1 second. What do you mean? Everybody gets happy with wine? Do you fill the baby's bottle with wine? Just drink wine? What does that mean? Rabbi Yehuda says, Anoshim b'roi lahem. Give the guys what the guys want, obviously permissible things. Noshim b'roi lahem. Women what they want. And that way everybody's happy. And he continues and he explains. Anoshim b'roi lahem. The men, what's suitable for them, what works for them, give them yayin, give them l'chaim, they'll be happy. So the Gemara says, v'noshim b'mai. So if the men, they like to say l'chaim, so what do the women like? The women like. So the Gemara says, what do the women like? Tani Rav Yosef said, it depends which woman. But really, you'll see from his answer, that's more of the same thing. He says, in Bavel, the style was bebigdei tziveinim, with brightly colored clothes. That was the Bavel style. So that's the fashion. In Bavel, you go Babylonian style. Beretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, they had a different style. Bebigdei pishton begohatzen, with beautiful white clothes that were ironed, sharply ironed. Simply stated, the woman goes shopping, they will be happy. That's all. End the story. And nothing has changed in how many years? That tell a silly joke that once there was a husband who was a big Rasha, a very wicked man, and the woman who was a big tzaddikus, but they stayed married. Maybe because she was a tzaddikus, whatever, they stayed married. Comes after 120 years, and they ended up dying on the same day. Would you imagine? They come up to heaven, and they greet this woman, so you're such a tzaddikus, you're straight to the highest of heavens. And they look at this guy and says, you're such a no-goodnik. We have a special place in the 9th circle of hell reserved for you. So she said, look, I stuck it out. I stayed married. I was very loyal. We want to stay together. I don't want to separate. So the Malachim got together. How we solve this problem? He deserves to go one place. She deserves to go somewhere else. And they had a solution. They sent him on an eternal shopping trip. That's the silly joke. Anyway, but the bottom line is, the men are from Mars, the women are from Venus, however you want to say it. That's the reality. Guys don't like to go shopping. At least most guys don't like to go shopping. They don't love walking around the mall looking at this clothes and that clothes, but leave me alone. I can't be bothered. But that woman like that. What does the guy want? Nothing. He wants to sit down at a bar and drink, and he's happy like a behemoth. He's sitting and say, L'chaim, he's happy. Everything's fine. I guess talking about being happy, another foolish joke. This woman went shopping. She lost her husband somewhere along the way. So she calls him on the cell phone and says, where are you? Where are you? He says, remember that jewelry store we passed by like a half hour ago? She says, yeah. He says, remember the one with the ring that you liked so much? She says, yeah. And she starts getting all teary-eyed. He says, I'm next door in the sports bar. So give everybody what they want. Everything will be fine. And the Gemara says, indeed, Tanya, we learned, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Eimer, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says like this. And the words of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira are coming now to kind of pull it all together. Bizman shebeis hamikdash kayam, in the time that the Beis Hamikdash was standing, ein simcha ela b'basar. Joy was not experienced save through the consumption of meat. But this is not just any meat. Shenemar, as it is written, v'zavachta shlomim v'achalta sham. You will bring offerings, peace offerings. You will eat there. V'samachta l'fnei Hashem elekecha. You will rejoice before the Lord your God. Va'achshav. But now, in our present day and age, she'ein beis hamikdash kayam. Now we don't have a beis hamikdash. So what do you do? What do you do? So he says, ein simcha ela b'yayin. Simcha is b'yayin. Why? Because that's just what people like to do. So he says, shenemar v'yayin yisamach levav enosh. Because there's a pasuk in Tillim. And the pasuk of Tillim says that wine gladdens the heart of an enosh, of a man. A very strange Gemara. From beginning to end, a strange Gemara. Gemara comes along, first makes a statement. You have a responsibility to make everybody happy. Okay? That sounds pretty onerous already. B'mai b'yayin, get them all drunk. Really? What does that mean? Is Rabbi Yehuda arguing with the Tanakama? We have a ton of Rabbanan, our rabbis learned, it's a majority opinion, that Chayav Adam, we're not talking about the person. He's Chayav, this is why he's Chayav for others, Chayav Adam. Adam principally could be understood as a human, it could be understood as a man. I mean, it could be understood as a man over here. His household, which could even be interpreted to mean his wife. And he's obligated to make them happy. It doesn't say him happy. How should he do so? It's b'yayin. B'mem esamcham. It doesn't say b'mehu mesameach. B'mem esamcham. What does it make them happy with? And what's the answer? B'yayin. Straight up b'yayin. That's it. Finished. The end of the statement. And then Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseida seems to be arguing. Rabbi Yehuda, pardon me. Rabbi Yehuda is a minority opinion. He's saying, no, Rabbi Yehuda says, listen, you're not being reasonable. You make everybody drink wine? What's going to be the point? He says, it's got to work. What do you mean, what's got to work? If this is halach, you have to drink wine, it's halach, you have to drink wine. Now all of a sudden it became wine and shopping. What's going on over here? How do we understand this? And like Banav means little children. What does the first opinion says? You should get little children drunk. Could be such a thing in Judaism. You ever heard of such a thing? A little children, chas v'shalom, abusing alcohol? Or are you using alcohol? So first of all, you should know that the Tosfos says right away that when it says b'mem esamche b'yayin, with what do you gladden his heart with the wine? The Tosfos says hainu b'zman hazeh. That's in this day and age, in our day and age. B'zman beis hamikdash, and the beis hamikdash ein simcha ela b'basar. The joy was only with meat. So what does that mean? If it says in the Torah that the joy is with meat, and we understand that to mean the joy is with a korban, what does that mean, practically speaking? So when there's no korban, then there's no mitzvah. There's no korban, there's no mitzvah. And indeed, many of the Rishonim believed that if there is no korban, there is no biblical mitzvah. No biblical mitzvah. They said it's only a rabbinic thing. Because the biblical mitzvah is to rejoice with a korban. So if it's not when it's a korban, it's a korban. An offering's an offering. But now if it's something which the rabbi said you should be happy, why would you say wine? I mean, some people like wine, some people don't like wine. And why did the Gemara make that blanket statement? B'yayin. The whole Gemara seems very, very odd. Things don't seem to, doesn't seem to make sense here. And to make matters even more difficult, the Rambam, in the laws of Yom Tov, in the 6th chapter, in the Halacha 18 says, Ha'anoshim oichlin basar v'shoisim yayin, says the Rambam. The men eat meat and they drink wine. Why? Because it says, she'ein simcha ela b'basar ve'ein simcha ela b'yayin. When the Torah speaks about v'samachta b'chagecha, it speaks about meat. When the Torah speaks about wine, it talks about the idea of simcha. So therefore, we coin this phraseology that ein simcha ela b'basar v'yayin. The only way you're going to have joy if you have wine and meat. Where did the Rambam get that from? And the Beis Yosef famously asked a question on the Rambam that our Gemara says, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, they had meat, a korban. In today's day and age, we only have wine. So how did the Rambam come along and says, the Rambam says today, he says, Ha'anoshim eichlin basar v'sheisim yayin. He says they eat meat and they drink wine. How does that work? How did you make that blanket statement? Seemingly, the Gemara is mechalak. The Gemara seems to make a difference between basar in the time of the Beis HaMikdash and yayin in today's day and age. Meat, when the temple stood, wine today. What the Rambam is saying. So the Yam Shel Shloimeh, he suggests the following resolution. And this is not only a question in a Rambam that you didn't know of, but I think that when you understand the way the Yam Shel Shloimeh explains the Rambam, this is relevant and it's necessary for properly understanding our Gemara. He says, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, how did a Jew find happiness? How did a Jew find happiness? When a Yid knew he can go to the Beis HaMikdash and he brings a korban, which is kiruv, closeness. And when he eats that korban, he's ingesting the holiness. That brought him joy. That brought him joy. Ein simcha alav basar meant when a Yid was actually, first of all, it didn't taste bad. The meat tasted good. The body was happy too. But the real joy came not for the taste. Maybe that helps a little. It came from his doing a mitzvah. He's coming close to Hashem. He's eating kachim, eating sacred things, so to speak, from God's table. So when you're eating holy food like that, it brought you joy. In today's day and age, it didn't need wine those days. There was no wine necessary. A Yid was drunk on the simcha shel mitzvah. He got high on the opportunity to do a mitzvah, the good fortune. You go to a person that wins the lottery and is shrieking on top of their lungs and they're all excited and they're happy. You say, are you drunk? He says, no. What are you so happy about? I'm happy. You want to know why I'm happy? I'll tell you why I'm happy. He doesn't need alcohol. When a person is very happy, something wonderful happens, you don't need alcohol. When do you need alcohol? Well, nothing really wonderful happened. But you want to make it like it happened. You want to kind of get into it. That's why you need alcohol. So when the Yid came to the Beis HaMikdash, he had his korban meat, everything was great. He didn't need any kind of synthetic, shall we say, aid or assistance. Nothing else had to be used to kind of propel him along. He had joy in the mitzvah itself. In today's day and age, the l'chaim all of a sudden becomes a little more helpful. There's a beautiful story, a mashal of the Baal Shem Tov, with regard to the concept of drinking wine on Yom Tov. So the Baal Shem Tov says that once upon a time, there was a Ben Shel Melech, a prince, a royal prince. And the royal prince was cast out of the palace. The king wanted to test him. He wanted to make a mensch out of his son, who was born and grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth. He said, how will he rule? He has no empathy. He doesn't know what it means to lack. He doesn't know what it means to suffer. He doesn't know what it means to have deprivation. How will he ever be a just ruler? So the king makes this terrible decision. I think terrible is a good decision, but a terribly difficult decision. To put his son into a horrible reality. To steal him out in the dead of the night and to deposit him somewhere far away. He doesn't know how he got there and nobody recognized him. There's no Facebook those days. Didn't even have photographs. And he came and he got up and he said, give me this and give me that. And they laughed in his face. I said, what are you, crazy? He said, I'm the prince. You're the prince. You're a Meshuggah. Nobody bought into that. And he went to the school of hard knocks. And he had to get banged around a little and zetzed around a little. He had to make a living. And the king always had people, looking in the background. In moments of danger, when all was lost, when the gangs attacked him, somehow he got always saved. He didn't know how, but somehow he was always saved. And he forgot eventually. He barely remembered where he came from. But his hands weren't so soft anymore. And he became a rough and tumble kind of fellow. And he figured out how to survive. He was, you do what you got to do. And the king is monitoring the progress of his son, and he hears, the son is no longer this pale-faced city boy. Now he's a tanned, hardened country boy, and he knows how to sleep on straw. He knows how to work with the animals, and he's out there in the fields, and he understands. And the king decides it's time for him to come home. And so he sends him a message, gets a letter, big royal seal. This is your father. I have not forgotten about you. You're going home. You're going home. Here's a bag of gold. Get yourself together. You're going home. And the young prince turned peasant and wanted to sing and dance. He was so joyous. But he already learned the hard way that if he does funny things like this, everybody will laugh at him. And it won't go well. But he had a bag of gold. So he took the bag of gold and he said to all the farmhands, let's go to the tavern. They said, why are we going to the tavern? We have no money. He said, I got money. Don't worry about it. And he went in, the whole crew came in there, and he said, drinks on the house. All right, drinks on the house. Like in in Russia and Ukraine, where the Baal Shem Tov was from, drinks on the house was not like Bloody Marys. Drink on the house was like, the straight, serious Bramfan. Like, so they knocked down one tumbler of this 96% alcohol, and they got happy a little. They got shake it up a little, and then he bought another round of drinks, and a third, and a fourth, and at some point everybody was dancing on the table. The peasants were dancing on the table because they were drunk out of their head, and he was dancing on the table because he was going home. Said the holy Baal Shem Tov, this is a mashal for when Yom Tov comes. The neshama feels close to Hashem. The neshama feels all of a sudden regards. He got regards. He gets a letter. This is your father. I didn't forget about you. He realizes all along, every time in a moment of danger and always lost, somehow we survived. Somehow Hashem took care of us always. And the neshama wants to be happy. The problem is the neshama learned how to get along with this thing called the body. And the bodily reality looks at him. Did the bis meshuga? He says, what are you happy about? What, did you win the lottery? Did you get something wonderful happen? What are you happy about? So what does he do? So the neshama buys a round of drinks. He feeds the peasant. Who's the peasant? The peasant, the body. 1 l'chaim, 2 l'chaim, 3 l'chaim. What happens? What happens eventually is that this is alcohol takes away inhibitions. The inhibitions that shackle the neshama, that kind of obscure the soul's ability to experience Yom Tov, get a little loosened. So the alcohol allows the neshama to express his joy. That was the Baal Shem Tov's mashal. And this is the pshat over here. We can understand the Gemara with these words of the Baal Shem Tov. That in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, what did you need to get the body out of the way? You gave him a little roast beef, that's all. That was good enough. He's already over the moon. The body, you have to shut the body up here. Have some flesh. Give him some flesh. That's it. He was already ready to sing and dance. He was already in a state of joy. But now we're in a kind of galus. And now that magical meat doesn't exist anymore. And now it's not so simple. You don't just give a little meat. It doesn't work. Little meat doesn't work anymore. So what do we need now? Now we have to go heavy metal. We have to... Can't rely on just a little roast beef is not going to do it. Now there has to be wine also. Now there has to be l'chaim also. And this is the Yam Shel Shlomo's words through the prism of the Baal Shem Tov. So he said, that's what the Yam Shel Shlomo says. That's the pshat, he said. In the time of the Beis HaMikdash, how did they experience joy? What are you talking? With the simcha, with the joy of the basar, with the meat of the korban. Korban, opportunity to be close to Hashem. Full joy is already being expressed. But when you deal with a situation outside, he says, now we need the concept of basar and yayin. And in that way, the Yam Shel Shlomo answers the question of the Beit Yosef, who asked in the Rambam that l'chayda from the Gemara, it seems that the basar was in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, and now is yayin. Yam Shlomo explains, he says, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, what was the primary ingredient that allowed the natural and organic joy of the neshama to be released? Was the basar. He says, now the basar is not basar. The meat is not meat of a korban. It's not kachim. And anywhere we're in a lower state, it's not a Beis HaMikdash. So today he says, there needs to be not just basar, but yayin. And since the primary emphasis, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, they also made kiddush. There was also wine. But that wasn't the emphasis. The emphasis was the basar. The real joy didn't come from making kiddush. The real joy came from eating the korban. But now we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. The meat helps a little, but the real joy comes when we say l'chaim. This is how we get through Golus. How we get through Golus, meaning you reveal the joy of the neshama. A little l'chaim helps. The meat helps too. But the main thing is the wine, is the yayin. And that's why the Rambam says the Yam Shel Shlomo, Ha'anashim eichlim basar v'sheisin yayin. Now, b'korin shal davar, in order to better understand this. So I mentioned that there are four times that simcha is mentioned. One time is by Ma'aser Sheni, one time is by Shavuot, one time is by Sukkot, and one time is Bikurim, the first fruit that was brought to the Beis HaMikdash, to thank Hashem for the yield, for the harvest, for the privilege, and the gift of the Holy Land of Eretz Yisrael. So which Yom Tov is not mentioned? No, I just said Shavuos is mentioned. Simchas Torah is part of Sukkot, mentioned as part of Sukkot. Pesach. On Pesach doesn't say any joy. Go figure. The one time a year we actually have a mitzvah to drink 4 cups of wine. It doesn't even talk about it. And a mitzvah to eat a korban, no joy mentioned. So I'm going to come back to this in a minute. I'm going to come back to this. But before we talk about the idea that Pesach is not, we clearly see from the Torah that there's this mitzvah of joy on Yom Tov. Yes? So the question is, how do we get to Pesach? It's in Torah it says Ma'aser Sheni, Torah it says Shavuos, Torah it says Sukkos, Torah it says Bikurim. It doesn't say this. So in order to understand how we're so certain that on Pesach we should also have this kind of joy, the Samachta b'Chagecha. So the Tosfos in Chagiga explains, this is the way the Mashal explains it at least, that the primary mitzvah of rejoicing on Yom Tov we learn from Shavuot, which is the first time the Torah mentions joy in Yom Tov. And that's what we learn for all the Yomim Tovim. And he says we learn what's called a hekesh. We liken Shavuos to Pesach and Shavuos to Sukkot. And we say, if on Sukkot, the first time the Torah mentions specifically there's a joy in the Yom Tov, then that is what's called a binyan av. It creates the foundation for all of the Yomim Tovim. So all of the Yomim Tovim will follow the paradigm of Shavuot, and since that's the first time the Torah tells us, here's how you celebrate the Yom Tov, it's not only speaking about Shavuot, it's speaking actually about all of the Yomim Tovim, because the truth is that the Yomim Tovim are not intrinsically different from one another. All of the Yomim Tovim is the same basic principle. The Yereim says that Shavuot has a pasuk. Sukkot has a pasuk. It has a pasuk. In fact, Sukkot is mentioned 3 times. So he says the only problem is Pesach. So the Yereim says the Gemara makes what's called a gezerah shava between, here it says Chamisha Asar, and there it says Chamisha Asar. That because the word Chamisha Asar, or the 15th day, shows up with the 15th day of Nisan, and because the same terminology is used about the 15th day of the 7th month, which is the month we call Tishrei, which is referring to Sukkot, so there's a juxtaposition that's drawn between the V'samachta b'chagecha that says on Sukkot and on Shavuot, but we make what's called a gezerah shava, a juxtaposition, a corollary between Pesach and between Sukkot. So we derive, by means of biblical exegesis, that this also has to have a state of joy. The Yereim brings another interpretation, and he says, it says in the Torah, Shalosh regalim tachog li. 3 regalim, you will, 3 festivals. You'll celebrate the festivities. Since it says tachogli, and then it says v'samachta b'chagecha, so the Yereim says if it says tachog, Shalosh regalim says about 3 festivals, and then it says v'samachta b'chagecha, that you have joy in the festival. So if it says tachogli and it says v'samachta, I understand that obviously there's going to be the same joy that's in one festival is going to be in all the festivals. And lastly, the Yereim says that the truth is that all of the festivals are likened to one another. And because of the third reason of the Yereim, he says this might even apply to Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is also a festival. It's not Shalosh Regalim, it's also a festival. So the festival by its nature is something that has to have the concept of joy. So on some level, you could learn the Gemara and say, in every festival, there's offerings. And that's where the joy is. And that's indeed how the Tosfos in Meseches Me'ed Katan on page 14 says, the Tosfos makes a statement, in today's day and age, there's no simcha min ha-Torah. There is no mitzvah that's biblically mandated, joy that's biblically mandated. Because the only way you could experience that kind of joy, the only way the Torah can legislate this concept of joy is when you came to a Beis HaMikdash and you're able to eat korban, an offering that brought you close to Hashem, and you can use the Baal Shem Tov's mashal we talk about, and it comes out beautiful. It literally can be understood, and it figuratively can be understood. It says today day and age doesn't work. The Shagas Aryeh, he proves that the opinion of the Rambam is that in today's day and age there is a mitzvah min ha-Torah, biblically, to be joyous on Yom Tov, even today. And he says, he also demonstrates a number of very clear proofs that the Ran, on Masechet Sukkah, says the same thing as well. So we have a different opinion here, different opinion, different approach. The question, of course, is how do you square that with the words of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira? Yehuda ben Beseira in our Gemara says, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash was bebasar, which means the flesh of the korban. And in today's day and age, it says it's beyayin. How do you work that out? So the Shagas Aryeh says the mitzvah is to be joyous. That's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is not how to be joyous. The mitzvah is to be joyous. It's only that in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, the greatest joy a Yid could have was coming to the Beis Hamikdash and participating in a korban that was the greatest joy possible. So naturally, we're talking about holy joy, not empty, vacuous joy. We're not talking about the disco. We're talking about a Yid experiencing a serene, a spiritually elevating joy. So where are you going to have a serene, spiritually elevating joy? The Beis Hamikdash. And what, you're just standing there and looking? Are you listening to the sounds? You're smelling the scent? When do you really participate in what happens in the Beis Hamikdash? When you're also eating the korban. Part of the korban is on the altar. It's euphemistically God eats, and part of the korban we're eating. Like eating together with God. That's real joy, he says. And really, in some way, the joy we experience in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, we can't experience today. But that doesn't mean we don't have a responsibility to try. And that's how I started out today's class. You have to do your best under the circumstances. You don't have a korban, doesn't mean you're exempt from joy. You have to do the best you could do. So what can I do? I don't have a Beis Hamikdash. What can I do? I don't have a korban. You do what you could. So I try to look. I look within the biblical descriptions. And what do I see? I see this idea of basar. I see the idea of yayin. Okay, basar really means a korban. But nonetheless, most people enjoy a good piece of meat. So have a piece of meat. Most people like nice wine, so drink wine. What about a guy who hates wine? He's an alcoholic. Don't drink wine. Fine, I don't know. Drink something else. You don't like meat, then don't eat meat. Find another way. The Torah is al pi harov tadaber. The Torah is giving you examples. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash was an example. You like meat, you don't like meat. You have to eat the meat, and especially on Pesach, the korban Pesach is an intrinsic part of the seder. But the Shagas Aryeh says what the Rambam is really telling us is that there's a mitzvah of a samachta. There's a mitzvah to be joyous. The Torah doesn't say v'achalta, and that's how you be joyous. It's just that we understand that the greatest joy a Yid could experience is being a participant in the Beis Hamikdash. But in today's day and age, you still have a responsibility to be joyous. And that's, he says, what the Gemara says later. So the first opinion, the Gemara says, beyayin. What the Gemara is really, you can understand, the first opinion is like a euphemism. What does it mean, beyayin? Maybe the Gemara is saying it doesn't mean beyayin, give little children to drink. It means that there's a certain things, like alcohol, it releases inhibitions, the things that restrain us, which hold us back. So everybody has their, so to speak, their opium. Everybody has their substance. For one, it's wine. For this one, it's Coca-Cola. For this one, it's candies. For this one, another Gemara says, you give the children candies. Everybody has this thing. Find everybody's, so to speak, yayin. Find his yayin. You find the thing that works for him. That's the meaning of beyayin today. It's not the meaning of basar. It's not about the wine and the meat per se. People like to feel they eat well. They feel good about themselves. But today, the emphasis is in the yayin. Yayin, naturally, people drink, they get happy. Most people. Temporarily. Doesn't really work. It's not a long-term solution. But for the meantime, he's happy. There's the story, there was two boys, we were talking once about vodka. One boy says, how does vodka work? Or you drink water and you get drunk? I see people, older people, they get happy. The other boy says, I heard it's made of bread. So he says, how come we don't get drunk when we eat lunch every day? So the first wise boy answered back, probably we don't have enough bread. So he said, let's make a deal. Today at lunch, I'll eat your sandwich too. Let's see if I get drunk. The boy said, okay. He meets him an hour later, he says, no, are you drunk? He says, no, but I'm very happy. It's a joke. You don't get it? The point is that alcohol works in a unique way. Alcohol plays with our mind. It releases certain endorphins which make us happy. The point is not about alcohol or not. You have to find your way to become happy. You find your way. So this is what the Alter Rebbe says in Shulchan Aruch. Let's talk about on a practical in halacha. The Alter Rebbe says in Siman Tov Kuf Chav Tes, which is chapter 529 of Orach Chaim, of the way of life. And this is talking about the mitzvahs of Yom Tov. And in Shulchan Aruch, he talks about the idea of having a meal on Yom Tov. And he talks about the corollary between Shabbos, which says kavod v'oinig, that you have to honor and respect the Shabbos, and it says you have to honor and respect the Yom Tov. And then he says this is the idea of joy. And he says, Chayiv Adam liyeh sameach v'toiv leiv. A person is obligated to be happy, good, glad of heart. Hu, uvana, v'ishtei, ubnei beisai, he, his children, his wife, the household, v'chol nilvim. Everybody's on your, so to speak, your responsibility. You have to make everybody happy. The simcha zu, the Alter Rebbe here, following the ruling, the way we understand, the Rambam understands the Gemara. He says, this joy, clear in the Rambam, simcha zu, what is this joy? It's a mitzvah saseh min ha-Torah. It's a biblical mitzvah. How do we know? Shenema, because it says, v'samachta b'chagecha ata uvincha uvitecha. It says clear. You have to rejoice. It doesn't say meat over there. It doesn't say carbons. You have to rejoice. So now the Alter Rebbe continues, v'ketzad misamchan. How do you make him happy? He says, haktanim, the little children, nice lehem klois ve'gezim. Give them candies. Candies and nuts, bonbons, chocolate. Make them happy. That's what makes them happy. Hanoshim, koinelem begodim v'tachshitim. Send them shopping in Nordstrom's. That's what he says. Go to Lord & Taylor. Yeah, the Gemara says, what do you think? Bring them nice clothes and buy them jewelry. Kefima maynei. Obviously, a poor guy he doesn't have bread. He says, buy diamonds. Kefima maynei. Whatever you're able to afford. V'ha'anoshim. What about the guys? They're much harder to please. You can't buy him a new iPhone because it's Yom Tov. You can't use it anyway. How you can make him happy? So he says, they ate basar shlamim. That's all the guy needs. The way to the guy is through his stomach. Everything's fine. He's happy. How do you do? How do you do it? You don't fulfill the obligation of joy only with yayin. So if yayin l'samach levav enish. And the Alter Rebbe says so. The Alter Rebbe says then fulfill this biblical mitzvah. Unless you're an alcoholic and can't drink wine. Wine is the main thing. Meat is not obligated. Meat is not the main thing now. Nonetheless, says the Alter Rebbe, mitzvah yesh b'achilas basar b'yom tov. There is a mitzvah to eat basar on Yom Tov. Kiva shenemar by simcha, because it says joy and it says it by a meat. And the meat of a carbon, it still says it by meat. And hoyel v'efshar lanu l'smoich by be'ikra simcha. This is what the Am Shlomo says. It doesn't work with only meat anymore. So therefore, yesh lanu l'samche b'shar min nismachis. We have to have other things. So what's that going to be? Okay, the shopping, candies, wine. We're using crutches. We're doing the best we could under the circumstances. But that's all Hashem gives us the ability to do. That's all He could be asking of us. He can only ask of us what He gives us the ability to do. So that's the idea of Simcha and Yom Tov. And just to prove that this whole business of the Simcha is really the Simcha of Yiddishkeit, there's a famous Yalkut Shemaini in Parshas Emer. And the Yalkut Shemaini asks a question. It's a medrash. Medrash says, how come when it comes to the mitzvah of Sukkot, it says 3 times, V'samachta b'chagecha? When it comes to the mitzvah of Shavuos, it says it once. When it comes to Pesach, it doesn't mention it even once. So the Yalkut says, I'll tell you why. Because Pesach is Chodesh Aviv. It's just spring. It's just things starting to grow. So the farmer worked and hoped and prayed and waited and starting to grow, blossoms, little greenery. He feels good about himself. But from now until the harvest season, there's a bit of a stretch. And all kinds of things could happen. There's going to be like a late frost comes in, could kill the crops as soon as they start growing. Locusts could come. All kinds of things could happen. So he's not really happy yet. Comes to Shavuos. Shavuos, he's cutting his crops. Okay, he's cutting his crops. He's happy. However, as the famous proverb goes, don't count your eggs, the chickens, before they hatch. They're still in the field. Things could still happen. When are you really joyous? He says, Chag Sukkot is called not Chag HaKotzer, but Chag HaOsif. When you bring it home, he says, now the money is in the bank, so to speak. The pantry is full. Now I'm really happy. So the Rebbe asks a question, a gewaldige question on this Yalkut. The Rebbe says, the Torah is, after all, an eternal document. You cannot say the Torah spoke to people who lived in a certain part of the world at a certain time in history. The gross national product in Israel today is not potatoes, and it's not tomatoes, and it's not even pomegranates. What's the gross national product? What does Israel make the most money from today? High technology. The Abraham gave us in the Seichel. So how was the high-tech guy going to be happy with on Sukkot? He brought home the microchips from the field. What? How does it work out? How does a medrash describing a situation of agriculture work for a Jew today? Even if he lives in Israel. So the Rebbe says you have to understand that all of this is primarily allegoric and euphemistic. It's not to be taken only in its literal iteration. At a certain time it was literal too, but that's not really what it's about. The Rebbe says, there's a famous Gemara in Masechah Seita on page 46 that says, my pedi, you know what fruits are? What's a fruit? Today an apple is a computer, a BlackBerry is a hand device. What's a fruit from a Torah perspective? A fruit is a mitzvah. That's what the fruits of life is mitzvahs. And you know what Torah is called? Torah is called grain. It's called grain, sustenance. Sustenance. Yeah, that's what Torah is called. So if Torah is the grain, and mitzvahs are the fruits. So when we talk about 3 seasons, we talk about spring, we talk about summer, and we talk about the harvest, fall. We're really talking then about different levels of Torah mitzvahs. So we go out of Mitzrayim, and God says, I'm going to give you a Torah. Amazing miracles happen. We still don't have a Torah. We still really have no clue what we're doing. We're complaining every 20 feet because we're just lost, confused souls, still trying to lick our wounds and recover from slavery. And we don't know what's going on. So you want to say there was mitzvahs? They got a mitzvah here, a mitzvah there. It wasn't. They had Tvuah, a little Torah. Moshe taught them a little something. Then comes Shavuos. And then comes Matan Torah. And it was amazing. And there was lights and action and thunder. And we saw all kinds of things. It was gewaldige stuff. And what happened? We said, Nasev and Nishma, we're ready to listen, we accept. We don't know what we were doing. And what happened was, 40 days later, we made this foolish golden calf, and we dropped the bowl. Everything got turned inside out. But then we had a whole process of tshuva. The process of tshuva is completed. And now it's Tishrei. And now we appreciate our Torah. And now all of a sudden, we're able to really rejoice in the beauty of Yiddishkeit. There's a famous mashal. It says, how come we don't have hakafas on Shavuot? Shavuot, God gave us the Torah. We're dancing Simchas Torah at the end of Sukkot. So the mashal is brought down that there was a king who had a daughter, and he gave his daughter to somebody. And the chassan was very happy, but he didn't really understand how lucky he was. He didn't really know his bride. He just got married to her. It's not like today, you move him for 10 years and then get married, after you're married 6 times already. Those days, it was like, they knew each other a little, they dated, they courted, didn't. And then, as time went on, and he got to learn who his wife really is, what an amazing woman she was, then he really was happy. So when he was like a delayed reaction. When was he really joyous? 6 months later, when he really appreciated what he got, then all of a sudden he was singing and dancing. He said, why are you dancing now? He says, now I understand what I got. It's the same thing. We got a Torah Shavuos, we were overwhelmed. We didn't appreciate it. Only when it comes later on Sukkot, he says, oh, this is the Torah. This is the beauty of Yiddishkeit. This is the possibility with a comeback kid. We can make a golden calf and still bounce back, and Hashem still accepts us. This is a transformative reality. So that's the real idea of Chag HaSukkos. That's called bringing the harvest home. Make the deposit. So if you learn that Sikha from the Rebbe, and you talk about the V'samachta, if this is the real pshat, this is the real profound, deeper meaning of the Yalkut, and the Yalkut is explaining the idea of V'samachta, what's the joy all about? The joy is all about neshama. The joy is about Yiddishkeit. And that's where we started off today. Start off with it. It said, how does a korban work? That's why I share with the mashal of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov says, because it's Yom Tov, because the neshama is excited. So we give him a little korban. The meat element takes care of the body, 1, 2, 3, and the neshama soars forth. Today's day and age requires a little more. But the real v'samachta b'chagecha, the real joy of Yom Tov, it's not the shopping in Nordstrom's, and it's not the candies, and it's not the fine wines, and it's not even the good steak. It's really about the Yiddishkeit. It's really about the closeness that we're able to appreciate and experience on a time of a Yom Tov with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's really interesting because Pesach is all about the Korban Pesach, which is about meat, and it's all about wine, 4 glasses of wine, but our custom is we don't eat any meat on the night of Pesach because we don't want to confuse it with the Korban Pesach. Nobody should say, oh, I had Korban Pesach last year. So we don't eat any meat. Which is kind of funny, because Alter Rebbe says it's a mitzvah to eat meat on Yom Tov, with the exception of Pesach night. But it's not really about meat. It's really about the things that help us to experience the joy of Yom Tov. And so, my friends, as they say, figure it out. But make sure everybody's joyous. And when a Yid celebrates on Yom Tov the way he or she should, then the ha'ara, then the radiance of Yom Tov is meir, it shines a whole year long. And with this, a Yid is able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'simcha u'v'tuv levav al kol hashana kula, all the weeks and the months that follow from Yom Tov to Yom Tov. And we continue to hope and pray that very speedily, and in our days, we'll celebrate the greatest Yom Tov of all, the coming of Mashiach, which is called Simchas Olam Al Rosham, eternal joy that will crown all of us b'mheira u'b'yameinu. Amen.